Imagine waking up at 3 a.m. to the sound of your walls vibrating. Not from thunder, not from music, but from something humming deep beneath your feet, something alive, something that's been waiting. 3 days after a man vanished from his sealed garage in Boulder, Colorado, the city sent in engineers. They found his walls hollowed out, filled with handwritten notes about signal interference and the fold. No body, no exit. Just one sentence scratched into the floor beneath his melted machine. Do not listen when it hums. This is the true story of what happens when you live too close to someone who wasn't building something to escape, but something to trap whatever was coming. And now, the hum is back. If you're not already subscribed, do it now, because what you're about to hear will make you question every quiet neighbor you've ever ignored. Part 1. The silence behind Craig's door. I've lived on Elmhurst Lane for nearly a decade. It's the kind of neighborhood that feels like it was designed to lull you into forgetting the rest of the world even exists. Well-manicured lawns, the occasional yoga mom waving from her hybrid, and barbecues in the summer where everyone brought something store-bought and smiled too big. It was safe, predictable. And it stayed that way until Darren Holt moved into the house 3 doors down. At first, no one paid him much attention. Darren was quiet. Late 40s maybe, wiry frame, silver-streaked hair always tied back, heavy glasses with thick lenses that made him look perpetually deep in thought, or lost in one. He had a limp, walked with a cane that didn't quite touch the ground every step. The story going around was that he used to work at Lockheed Martin, something with advanced engineering, but left after a disagreement. That was all Tammy from across the street could scrounge up, and if Tammy didn't know more, that meant no one did. He didn't introduce himself when he moved in. Just a U-Haul, a few large crates, and an old beige sedan with plates from Nevada. The only time I ever spoke to him was when I waved and said, "Hey, welcome to the neighborhood," and he gave me a look that was more calculation than acknowledgement, like he was measuring how long it would take to walk around me. Within weeks, strange things began to happen. First came the sounds. Late at night, well after midnight, there'd be a low, mechanical humming that drifted out from his garage. It wasn't music, and it wasn't something you could easily describe. It vibrated in your chest more than your ears. Some nights, I'd wake up with my windows rattling, the sound pulsing like a heartbeat made of steel and static. Then there was the light. A soft greenish glow would leak from the garage vents. One night I saw it flicker rapidly like it was reacting to something or someone. Neighbors started to talk, but not the way they talk about noisy parties or overgrown lawns. They talked in questions. Have you seen him leave during the day? Do you think he's building something? Did you hear that pop last Thursday around 3 a.m.? I brushed it off. We all did. Everyone wanted to believe it was just an odd man tinkering in his garage. After all, isn't that what men like him do? Then the dog went missing. Maya, a golden retriever who belonged to a little girl named Ava next door, vanished during her morning walk. Leash snapped clean in half. Her father swore he heard a sharp whining noise and ran down the block, just in time to catch a glimpse of a shadow dragging something into the alley behind Darren's house. He never said it aloud, but I could see it in his eyes. He thought Darren had something to do with it. 3 days later, animal control showed up and wouldn't say why. They were in hazmat gear. A week after that, a letter appeared duct taped to Darren's fence. It read, "Notice of violation. Cease unauthorized operation immediately. Code 4327B. No one knew what that meant, but he did. The next morning I passed by and saw him sitting in a lawn chair in his driveway. Not reading, not doing anything, just sitting there staring at his garage door. His face was tight, not angry, not even disappointed, just hollow like something had left him. And then silence. The garage door never opened again. The light vanished. The sound stopped. It should have been comforting, but it felt wrong, like the silence was hiding something deeper. One evening in late November, I opened my front door and immediately gagged. The air was thick chemical, sharp. Not gas, not smoke. Something synthetic like burnt plastic mixed with nail polish remover. I wasn't the only one. People stepped outside, fanning their faces, looking confused. That's when we heard it. The hum was back, but deeper now, thicker. It vibrated in your lungs. I turned to see if anyone else noticed, and Tammy was already on the phone. That's when I knew it wasn't just paranoia. She only called two people, her sister and the police, and her sister lived in Utah. By 7:15 p.m., two fire trucks and a police SUV were parked outside Darren's home. Officers paced the sidewalk, not approaching the house. One firefighter had a hazmat mask hanging from his neck. Whatever was in there, it wasn't routine. Yellow tape went up fast. I stayed back, pretending to take out my trash just to watch. I saw an officer knock on the front door and get no answer. The garage remained sealed shut. That was the last time anyone saw Darren Holt. I checked the local news all night. Nothing. No updates. Just one vague line buried in the local section the next morning. Emergency response to potential chemical hazard in North Boulder. No injuries reported. Tammy texted me at 1:12 a.m. they broke open the garage. No follow-up, I replied. She didn't answer. The next morning the street was blocked off. Police vans, unmarked trucks, a bomb squad vehicle. The entire block looked like a crime scene in a movie. I parked 2 streets over and walked back. The air felt heavier. Still chemical, but now it smelled like ozone, too, like the aftermath of lightning. I wasn't prepared for what I saw next. They wheeled something out on a gurney. It looked like a melted skeleton of a machine, twisted pipes, scorched wires, a glowing core that pulsed dimly even in daylight. I asked a nearby officer if they found Darren. He didn't even look at me. Just said, "We haven't located the homeowner yet." That stuck with me. Located, not found, not rescued, located. Like he was a rogue satellite. They found no forced entry. His car was still in the driveway. The front door was locked from the inside. No body, no blood, just that contraption in the garage. Weeks went by. Darren's house was sealed off. Metal panels over every window, no trespassing signs. But sometimes when the wind blew right, you could still hear that hum. Lower, subtler, almost like it was hiding under your skin. The city eventually sent a team of engineers. I overheard one of them say, "The insulation's been stripped. The walls, they're hollow now." Another said he was tracking something. Inside they found notes, handwritten pages covering the walls. Obsessive, paranoid. Words like signal bleed and subterranean mapping repeated over and over. A neighbor claimed he saw a map with red pins connecting points across Boulder. Another swore there were schematics for something he called the Fold. Rumors spread. Some said he was building a bomb and lost his nerve. Others claimed he discovered something beneath the city and tried to block it out. One kid believed Darren built a machine that could see into alternate dimensions and got pulled through. I didn't believe any of it. Until the night I heard the hum again. 3 a.m. I was walking my dog and decided to pass the house. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to see if anything had changed. It hadn't, but my dog stopped. Ears perked. Body tense. And then I heard it, just barely, coming from under the driveway. A pulsing tone, deeper than before, rhythmic, not mechanical, organic. I stood frozen. My breath clouded in front of me. That's when I saw a light flicker through the seams of the garage panel. Not green this time. Red. I yanked the leash and ran. That night I didn't sleep, and I haven't slept properly since. They say the house is being sold now. New listing. Fixer-upper with a spacious garage, great for creative projects. They don't mention the machine, the notes, the hum, but it's still there. And I'm starting to wonder if Darren didn't disappear. Maybe he just went somewhere else. And maybe, just maybe, he wasn't trying to destroy anything. Maybe he was trying to contain it, whatever it was, whatever it still is, waiting beneath the concrete, watching, listening, humming. And I'm terrified that one night soon that hum will grow louder again, and this time no one will be left to hear it. Part 2. 3 weeks behind this wall. I've always believed that people reveal themselves through sound. Not words, those can lie, but the small, unintentional things. A dragging footstep, a restless cough in the middle of the night, the rhythm of a faucet turning off just a second too late. That's why what I heard from the unit next to mine didn't sit right from the very beginning. I had just moved into an aging apartment complex on the edge of Savannah's historic district. A charming place if you ignored the cracked bricks and the constant scent of mildew from the hallway pipes. My unit was small, clean, with a balcony that faced an old oak tree draped in Spanish moss. It felt peaceful. Until the thud started. At first it was subtle, a dull bang like someone dropped a suitcase. Then a dragging sound, not fast, not frantic, deliberate, like someone was moving something heavy across the floor just inches from my headboard. I lived in Unit 306. The unit next to me, 308, was quiet otherwise. The blinds were always shut, and I never saw anyone come or go. I asked the property manager once who lived there. He flipped through his clipboard and said, "Brent Morris. Been here a year, art teacher or something. Never gives me trouble. Brent." That name stuck with me mostly because I had never heard it spoken in the building before. Days passed. The sounds continued. Sometimes it was tapping, soft, like fingernails on drywall. Other times it was a low hum, not from electronics, but something almost vocal, like a moan buried beneath the walls. I told myself it was plumbing, or a faulty vent, or my own imagination. I had just moved in after all. Everything felt unfamiliar. Then one night I muted the TV and leaned toward the wall, and I heard it. A voice, faint, female, cracked and desperate. "Help!" I snapped upright. It wasn't loud, not even a full whisper, just a leak of pain, like someone too weak to call out but too terrified not to try. I stayed still for what felt like an hour, my hand frozen above my phone. I kept waiting for it to repeat, but it didn't. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning I made coffee and stood at the wall. Nothing, just silence. But that kind of silence is loud when you're listening for it. 2 nights later I heard it again. Clearer this time, "Please help me." This time I didn't hesitate. I called 911. My voice was shaky. I told them what I heard, gave them the unit number, and stood barefoot in my hallway waiting. The officers arrived within minutes, 2 of them. They knocked on Brent's door. No answer. They called for backup, then asked the building manager for a key. When he arrived and unlocked the door, it wouldn't open. Something was behind it. That's when one of the officers, tall, buzz-cut, emotionless, sighed and said, "Move." He kicked it in. It took 3 tries. What we saw will haunt me forever. Inside, the lights were off. No furniture, no decorations. Just a bare mattress on the floor, stained and surrounded by food wrappers. Against the far wall, a woman lay curled up, wrists zip-tied, ankles bruised. Her eyes were open, but they didn't see us. She looked through us. She was so pale, I thought she might already be dead. One of the officers rushed forward with a blanket. The other radioed for EMTs. I just stood there, heart thudding so hard I thought I'd vomit. The woman started whispering over and over. He said I had to stay quiet. He said they wouldn't hear me. She had been there for 3 weeks. 3 weeks in the unit right next to mine. separated by a wall barely thicker than my mattress. Brent, if that was even his real name, wasn't there. The cops said they'd put out an APB. A neighbor said they'd seen him leave earlier that day with a duffel bag. He didn't even lock the door properly. Just barricaded it from the inside. I gave a statement, answered the same questions over and over. Had I seen her before? Did I hear anything else? Had I noticed him acting strangely? Yes. No, I don't know. What I really wanted to say was, I knew something was wrong and I waited. I waited for it to be obvious, for someone else to confirm it, for some part of me to feel safe before acting. And she waited too. Every single second behind that wall. The next day, the cops arrested Brent at a bus stop in Jacksonville trying to leave the state. He didn't resist, didn't speak, just sat there blank-faced as they cuffed him. When the news came out, the building went cold. People avoided each other in the hallways. No one wanted to talk about it. The woman, her name was Elena, survived, but she'd been through hell. The detectives said Brent had met her online, pretending to be a film student interested in her photography. He gained her trust, invited her for a project, and then never let her leave. No one knew where he got the tools, the zip ties, the blackout curtains, the heavy locks on the bedroom door. He had installed everything himself, carefully, meticulously. He had planned this, and I had heard it. I moved out within 2 weeks, broke the lease, paid the fine. I didn't care. I couldn't stand being near that wall, but it followed me. Every apartment since then I listen. I press my ear against walls. I check for cameras in vents. I memorize the sound of my neighbor's footsteps. And if I hear a cry, any cry, I call. Because Elena was right there, inches away, and I nearly did nothing. We all like to think we'd be the hero, that we'd act, that we'd know. But sometimes evil lives one wall away. And it only takes one choice, one delay for someone to suffer in silence. And sometimes when I close my eyes at night, I still hear her voice, faint, weak, lost. Please help me. Part 3. Sarah's Shadow. There's something deeply wrong about a house that keeps its secrets after the police have left. They came with sirens and flashlights. They broke doors, questioned neighbors, taped off the porch like it mattered. But when they left, the air didn't clear. The unease didn't fade, because Lila was still missing. And Mr. Crow's house still whispered when no one else was listening. It began during a heat wave. The summer was so dense, even the shadows felt heavy. I was 17, restless, and the kind of bored that makes you lie to your parents about where you're going just so you can wander streets you've always known, hoping to feel something new. That's how I met her, Lila Moore. She just moved into the blue house across the street with the cracked picket fence. 15, small, always in oversized band tees and black combat boots that made her look like a cartoon character trying to punch through the real world. We weren't close, just sidewalk friends. She'd nod when I passed, sometimes flash a peace sign. I remember once she said something weird like, if you walk past a place long enough, it starts to remember you. I laughed. She didn't. 2 weeks later, she disappeared. No warning, no goodbye. 1 minute she was skateboarding down the hill behind the church, and the next, nothing. Her parents thought she ran away. She'd done it before, they said. I didn't believe that. Lila wasn't the type to vanish without a message, not without a trace, not without leaving a ghost behind. But that's when the whispers started, about Mr. Elias Crow. He lived at the end of the street in a crumbling Victorian house that hadn't seen a porch light in years. He was old, maybe 70, but walked with a strange rigidity, like his bones were held together with string. He never drove, never waved, but people said they'd seen Lila talking to him more than once, on his porch, by his garden gate, always alone. And then she was gone. I remember the moment things shifted. The air that morning felt still. like the whole street was holding its breath. Her parents called the police. Then came the knocking, the questioning, the slow movement of dread crawling from one household to the next. I was sitting on my porch when they first approached Crow's place. He didn't answer the door. They circled the house, tapped on windows, still nothing. And then they brought in the dogs. They barked once by the basement window, and then stopped. The police returned that night with a warrant. The whole neighborhood watched from behind curtains. When they opened the front door, it creaked like a scream, a dry, aching sound that cut through the night louder than any siren. They went inside, and for hours no one came out. No shouting, no alarms, just the shuffle of boots and the glow of flashlights slicing across the porch windows. Then, just after midnight, an unmarked black van pulled up. That's when everyone knew it was bad. Rumors flew fast. Some said they found a secret room. Others said the walls were covered in newspaper clippings and red string like some serial killer cliché. But the part that stuck with me, what they eventually confirmed, was that they found a sealed room beneath the basement. Not locked, sealed, with insulation foam, nails, steel plating. As if someone wasn't trying to keep people out, but keep something in. The room was empty, almost. Inside they found a single cracked mirror nailed to the wall, a backpack filled with Lila's clothes, her phone powered off wrapped in a t-shirt, a set of candles melted down to black wax stumps, and on the inside of the door, scratched into the metal with something sharp, "Look in the mirror when the light flickers." They never found Lila. And Mr. Crow. They arrested him the next day sitting calmly on his porch, hands folded in his lap, rocking slowly in his chair. He never said a word, never asked why, never asked what they found. Just stared at the basement window as they led him away. They searched his house for days, found dozens of old mirrors, framed, shattered, antique, stacked in closets, hidden behind drywall. One mirror had the word LILAH etched faintly into the glass. Still, they had no body, no proof of murder. He was charged with unlawful detainment and psychological abuse, but eventually ruled unfit for trial. Sent to a facility, died months later, and that should have been the end, but it was. A year after, the city boarded up the house, put it on the market. No one wanted it except one person, me, not to live in it. God, no. But I needed to see it. I don't know why, maybe guilt, maybe something darker. One evening I snuck in through the back, the boards already loosened by time and teenagers. The house was cold, not in temperature, in feeling. Like a wound never allowed to close, dust in the air, shadows long and unnatural. I made my way to the basement. And there it was, the sealed door, removed now, but the frame was still scorched at the edges. The mirror still hung on the wall. I stared into it, just my reflection. Then the light flickered, and for a fraction of a second it wasn't just me. There was someone standing behind me, a girl in a black shirt and combat boots, but when I turned, nothing. I looked again. Just me, until the light flickered again. And this time she smiled, Lila, pale, eyes too wide, mouth moving, saying something I couldn't hear. I stepped closer. And then the bulb shattered. I bolted. I didn't sleep that night or the next, but that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came when I checked my phone. There in my photo gallery was a new picture, not one I took. It showed me, standing in front of the mirror. But in the photo, Lila's hand is on my shoulder. And beneath the image in my phone's file name were 3 words, "You found me." Part 4. The man who watched me sleep. The first time I saw the photo, I didn't understand what I was looking at. It was lying beneath my welcome mat, a Polaroid, damp at the edges from the rain, face down like someone had dropped it in a hurry. I almost didn't pick it up. I thought it was trash. But when I flipped it over, I froze. It was a picture of me, in my bedroom, asleep. The angle wasn't from the doorway or the hall. It was closer, like from the foot of my bed. My throat tightened. I looked behind me, expecting to see someone watching, but the hallway was empty. Still, I felt it, a coldness in my bones that no logic could shake. I lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment on the east side of Portland. It wasn't glamorous, but it was cozy. Quiet, third floor, big windows, brick walls. I'd lived there for 6 months and never once felt unsafe. Until now. I turned the Polaroid over again. There was no date, no writing, just the grainy image of me curled up on my side, blanket over my shoulder. My bedroom curtains were always drawn, always, and yet there I was, on display. I tore through my apartment that day, checked for cameras, holes in the vents, strange lights, nothing. I barely slept that night. I lay stiff in my bed, every creak of the floorboard above me a jolt of fear. My curtains were drawn tighter than ever. I left my lamp on, the light buzzing faintly in the silence. No second photo appeared, not that day, not the next, but then it started again, every Friday, same time, around noon. Same place under the mat, always a new photo. One showed me brushing my hair in the bathroom, another cooking pasta in my oversized hoodie. This one made my stomach twist, caught me changing shirts. It had been taken through the crack between curtain and wall. That's when I bought a motion sensor camera and installed it on my balcony, but it didn't catch anything. I told myself maybe it was a prank. Maybe someone was messing with me. A neighbor, a bored teen. I asked the building manager to check the hallway security footage. He did, and came back pale. There's nothing, he said, voice low, like no one appears, just the photos showing up, like they blink into existence. I started sleeping in the living room, eyes on the door, knife under the pillow. I told friends. They said I was being paranoid, that I needed to unplug for a while, breathe. But they didn't understand. He was in my room, I just didn't know when. A week later, I found another photo, but this one wasn't just of me. In the background, there was a shadow, faint, just behind the curtain, half of a face. A hand pressed against the glass. I showed the police. They filed a report, took the photo, told me to keep my windows locked and call 911 if anything else happened. But that night, I found something worse. The plant by my window had withered, its leaves twisted, browning, but not randomly. They had curled into a shape, the shape of my sleeping body. Arms bent the way I lie when I sleep, the same slouch in the spine, the same bend in the knees. I threw it out, and I cried, not because of the plant, not because of the police doing nothing, but because I realized this person, this thing wasn't just watching me. He was studying me. I tried to move out, gave notice. But the landlord reminded me I had 6 more months on my lease and breaking it would cost me $2,000. That night, I packed a bag and stayed at my sister's. When I returned home 2 days later, the apartment was still. Too still. I did a sweep, nothing out of place, until I opened the bedroom closet. There on the inside of the door, written in faint pencil, were the words, "You sleep like a painting," and underneath it, "Do you dream of me too?" I screamed. The police came. Again, took notes, again, but there were no fingerprints, no signs of forced entry, nothing, except a new photo under my pillow. This one was different. It was me, yes, but I wasn't sleeping. I was lying in bed, eyes open, staring at the camera. The problem, I had no memory of that photo being taken. None. And then I noticed something else. In the corner of the photo, time-stamped in faded ink, was a date. 2 days before I moved in. Part 5. The buzz at 1:06 a.m. The first time it happened, I chalked it up to a drunk neighbor. It was 1:06 a.m. I remember the exact time because I had just finished brushing my teeth and glanced at the microwave clock before heading to bed. Then, without warning, the buzzer rang. One loud, hollow buzz from the building's front entrance. I jumped. It was too late for visitors and too early for deliveries. I lived alone in a 3-story apartment building just outside downtown Austin. The front door had a keypad, but the buzzer system wasn't sophisticated. There was no camera feed, just a loud buzz that echoed through the apartment when someone pressed your unit's button. I didn't get up, didn't check the window. After a minute or two of silence, I convinced myself it was a mistake and went to bed. But the next night it happened again. Same time, same buzz, same silence after, and then again the night after that. By the fourth night, I was on edge. I started sleeping with the lights on in the hallway. My phone was always charged and beside me. I even placed a small hammer next to the bed. Ridiculous, I know, but fear doesn't need logic. The buzzer continued. 6 a.m. every single night. Until the night it rang twice. Bzzzzz. 5 seconds of silence. Bzzzzz. That's when I called the property manager, Mike. He was in his 50s, always smelled like cigars, and didn't believe in technology past 1997. It's probably some kid screwing around, he said through the phone. Or maybe a homeless guy trying random units. I'll check the logs. The next day, he texted me a photo, the printed entry log from the main door. It had no entries between midnight and 2 a.m. for any unit. No access granted. No doors opened. But I heard it, I texted back. Maybe faulty wiring. We'll get it looked at. They didn't. Instead, the buzzer kept ringing. Sometimes once. Sometimes twice. Always at 6. Then, one night, I made the mistake of looking. I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark living room with all the lights off, staring out the window toward the front of the building. The street was quiet. No cars. Just the orange glow of the sodium lights casting long shadows. At 1:05 I leaned forward. At 1:06 the buzzer rang, and that's when I saw him, a man, standing across the street. He was barely visible in the shadows, wearing a black hoodie and jeans. No movement, just standing there facing the building. I watched for 15 minutes. He didn't budge. Finally, I turned away to grab my phone. When I looked back, he was gone. I started keeping a log. Every night I wrote down what I heard. I took screenshots of my phone clock when the buzzer rang. I even started recording audio. That's when things got worse. The first audio recording caught something else besides the buzz. A sound, barely audible, a breath. It wasn't mine. I had set my phone down on the kitchen counter before going to bed. The next morning I played it back. The buzzer, then silence. Then a low exhale, close, too close. Like someone was standing just inside my front door. I checked the locks, everything was sealed. Windows latched, chain on the door, but the breath was there, and it wasn't mine. The next day I bought a motion detection camera and pointed it at my front door. That night I stayed at a friend's place. I didn't want to be there when the buzzer went off. At 6 a.m. my phone notified me. Motion detected, I opened the app. The footage showed my door, still. Then the door handle moved just slightly, then again, like someone was testing it, slowly. No knocking, no speaking, just a quiet, creeping attempt. The footage ended. When I got back in the morning, nothing was out of place. But under the door, half sticking out, was another Polaroid. It was my hallway, taken from the inside. That night I couldn't breathe. I sat in the bathtub with the shower running cold and lights off, clutching my phone and waiting. I didn't sleep. And at 6 a.m. my phone lit up again. Motion detected. I didn't open the footage. I called the police. When they arrived, they found no one. They searched the building, the parking lot, even the roof. Nothing. I showed them the photo. One of the officers, a younger guy named Ramirez, looked pale. "You said you live alone, right?" "Yes." He flipped the photo around and pointed to the reflection in the mirror at the end of my hallway. There was a man standing just behind me, wearing a hoodie and smiling. I moved out 2 days later, paid the penalty, left furniture behind. I didn't care. I now live in a high-rise with 24/7 security, keycard access, and no buzzer system. But every so often at 1:06 a.m. I wake up, not because of a sound, but because I feel watched. Like someone's still out there, waiting, remembering my name, and wondering why I stopped answering the buzz. Part 6, Room 4B. I moved into Room 4A in the middle of a blizzard. Chicago winters don't forgive easily. I remember carrying boxes up 3 flights of ice-slicked stairs, while my breath fogged the air like cigarette smoke. The apartment building was old, creaky, with pipes that groaned and walls that whispered. But it was cheap, and I was a broke grad student, so I didn't ask for much. The landlord, Mr. Leary, handed me the keys and gave a half-smile. "If you hear weird noises at night, don't worry, old bones. This building's full of them." I thought he was being poetic. My unit, 4A, was across from 4B, and 4B was quiet. Always. I saw the tenant once, Noah. A lanky guy in his late 20s, always in a hoodie, hood up even in the lobby. He never made eye contact, never spoke, just nodded when we passed in the hallway like I was an obstacle he needed to acknowledge and avoid. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of his door cracking open late at night. No lights. Just the sound of something being dragged inside, like a bag or a chair. The kind of sound you pretend not to hear. One night I heard crying. Not loud, not hysterical, just steady. It was coming through the wall. At first I thought I was imagining it. I paused my studying and leaned closer. It was faint, muffled, but definitely there. A girl's voice. Broken, exhausted, repeating something over and over. "Noah, please, please let me sleep." I remember my chest tightening. That internal alarm, that low-grade panic. But then the crying stopped, and I told myself I was wrong, misheard, it was late, I was tired. But the next night it happened again. Same voice, same pleading. I pressed my ear to the wall and realized something worse. There was no other voice, only hers. I knocked on Noah's door the next morning, no answer. I tried again that evening, still nothing. When I asked the landlord if everything was okay with 4B, he shrugged. "Noah's quiet, pays cash, never complains, that's rare, you know." I didn't know what to say, but the crying didn't stop, it changed. Sometimes I'd hear humming, off-key, childlike. Sometimes silence for days, and then suddenly pounding, like fists against drywall. Then nothing again. I started recording the sounds. Late at night, I'd place my phone against the wall. I wanted proof. I needed proof. But every time I played them back, there was nothing, just static. Then, one night, the fire alarm went off. I ran into the hallway along with the other tenants. Smoke was pouring from under the door of 4B. The landlord opened it with his master key, and what we found inside was not what any of us expected. No flames, no smoke, just heat. The room was stifling like a sauna. The windows were fogged over. The floor was covered in damp clothes and burnt candles, and in the middle of the room a mattress, bare, stained. Noah was gone, but a girl, maybe 16, was curled up on the mattress. Her wrists zip-tied to the bed frame. Her ankles, too. Her eyes were open, and she was smiling. The police were called. The EMTs. Chaos flooded the hallway, but through it all she never stopped smiling, even as they untied her, even as they wrapped her in a blanket. When they asked her name, she whispered, "He said if I smiled, you'd finally see me." That was 2 years ago. They never found Noah. The girl had been missing from a nearby city for over a month. She told investigators he'd found her online, posed as someone her age, invited her for a photography project. He never took photos. He just made her smile. Room 4B was sealed after that. But sometimes when I walk past it late at night, I swear I hear humming again. And once, just once, I knocked on the door, and someone knocked back. Part 7, Smoke from the Gura. When I first moved into the cul-de-sac on Wren Hollow Drive, everything looked like a southern dream. White fences, swinging porch benches, hydrangeas in bloom. The kind of place you imagine raising a family, sipping sweet tea while watching kids ride their bikes in circles under streetlights. My house backed onto a dense line of pine trees, and 2 houses to the left was Mr. Jameson. He was old, late 60s, maybe older, retired fireman or so I was told, kept to himself. Always outside tending his garden, trimming shrubs, humming to old blues songs from a portable radio he kept clipped to his belt. His yard was immaculate, not a weed in sight. But there was one thing that always made me uncomfortable: his garage. It was detached from the house, small and squat, with a faded red door and a chimney that I assumed was ornamental, until one morning when I saw smoke rising from it. It wasn't thick, not like a wood-burning stove, more like incense. Thin, curling trails that smelled off. Not quite sweet, not foul either, just unnatural. I mentioned it in passing to my other neighbor, Carla. She frowned. That thing runs almost every day. I've asked him before, he just says it's for the roots. Whatever that means, I shrugged it off. Everyone had their quirks. Until the morning I found the effigy. It was placed on my back doorstep, made of straw. Humanoid, twisted wire arms. A single black button sewn into its head for an eye. At first I thought it was a prank. Halloween was still weeks away. But when I picked it up, something slipped from inside it, a piece of paper. Folded tightly. My name was written on it, not printed, not typed, handwritten, in red ink. Inside, nothing but a circle with a dot in the center. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept checking the backyard, turning on lights. At one point around 2:30 a.m. I looked out and saw a figure standing at the edge of my lawn just past the tree line. It was Mr. Jameson. He wasn't moving, just standing, watching. The next morning I confronted him. He didn't deny it. "I was making sure you weren't awake," he said. "What the hell does that mean?" He smiled, a smile so empty it felt carved into his face. "You don't want to be awake when it visits." I reported him to the HOA. They shrugged. "He's old, he's odd, but harmless." But he didn't feel harmless. Days passed, more smoke, more effigies, each one placed closer to the front of my house, on the porch, on the windowsill, one inside the mailbox. Each had a folded paper inside, each with the same symbol. One morning I found ash scattered on my welcome mat. I swept it up and noticed tiny footprints in it. Bare, child-sized, but not from any child in the neighborhood. Because they had 4 toes. I started hearing noises in the attic, scraping, shifting. But every time I checked, nothing. Then 2 nights before Halloween, my smoke detector went off. There was no fire, just a smell. Like burning cloth and old meat. I followed the scent to the garage. My garage. Inside, written on the concrete floor in ash, was another symbol. But this time it was drawn with footprints. The same 4-toed prints, moving in circles. Perfectly symmetrical. I couldn't breathe. I stumbled back and called the police. They came, took notes, said it was probably kids, satanic panic kind of thing, but I knew it wasn't kids. Because that night I watched Mr. Jameson open his garage. And inside there was no car, just a ring of burned soil, candles, and at the center an effigy the size of a human body. I saw him kneel before it, begin to chant. I recorded it. I still have the video. The police dismissed it. He's eccentric, not dangerous. But that same night the power in the neighborhood went out, and in the dark I heard something knocking on my windows, not tapping, not scratching, knocking. The power came back at 3:33 a.m. the next day. Jameson was gone. His house was empty, furniture untouched, no sign of departure, just a single candle still burning in his garage, and on the floor an effigy. This one had my face drawn on it. Charcoal, black button eyes, my name carved into the back with something sharp. The police searched for him, never found him. I moved within a week. But sometimes when I walk past a storm drain or hear wind rustle pine trees, I catch the scent of that smoke again. And once, just once, I found a straw button on my new doorstep. No effigy, just the eye, watching, waiting. Part 8, a hole in the floor. When I first moved into the old brownstone off Flatbush Avenue, I didn't notice the hole. It was a quiet building, 4 units, 2 up and 2 down. I had the upper left corner. The windows faced the alley and the pipes clanged like angry ghosts in winter. But the rent was low and I was too tired of moving to care. My downstairs neighbor was a man named Marcus, a failed playwright, someone said, mid-30s, always wore fingerless gloves and muttered to himself while unlocking his door. He lived in the unit directly beneath mine. The first few weeks, everything was fine, until I started to feel watched. It began subtly. I'd be brushing my teeth and get the sensation of eyes on my back. Sitting on the couch, I'd feel like something was just off. It wasn't fear. Not yet, just a low hum of awareness that never quite left. Then one day, I dropped a pen behind the radiator and saw it. A hole, small, deliberate, bored into the wood flooring like it had been made with a drill. About the size of a quarter. I knelt down and looked closer, and realized I was staring into Marcus's apartment, directly into it. The hole was positioned perfectly to view my living room from below. I pulled away, heart racing. Every shadow in the room suddenly felt alive. Every moment I had danced, stretched, or cried in that space came rushing back with nauseating clarity. I didn't confront him right away. I wanted proof. So I set up a mirror, angled it toward the hole, put a small sticky note on the floor beside it, just barely visible from above. It read, "I see you." The next morning it was gone. I went downstairs, knocked. No answer. I heard shuffling inside, then silence. So I waited. That night I crept down again, quiet, careful. And this time the door to Marcus's apartment was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. The smell hit first. Sweat, old food, something metallic underneath. Inside the lights were dim. Candles lined the shelves. The windows were blacked out with thick curtains, and on the far wall, dozens of photographs of me sleeping, eating, reading, all taken from below through the hole. In the center of the room was a wooden chair, worn and splintered. Next to it, a small table with a spiral notebook. I opened it. The first page read, "The show." Each entry was dated. Each described what I did, what I wore, how long I stayed in one place, what emotions I showed. One page read, "Subject appears distressed, cries while watching television. Beautiful, raw, better than rehearsed trauma." Another, "Subject dances to music, sways like she knows I'm watching. Intimate, electric, thank you." I vomited. Then I heard the floor creak behind me. Marcus was standing in the hallway, pale, smiling. "You found your audience," he whispered. I ran, locked myself in my apartment, called the police. By the time they arrived, he was gone, but the hole remained. And worse, the next day a package arrived at my door, no return label. Inside was a USB stick. It contained video of me from beneath the floor, but also of others, at least 5 different women, different apartments, different floors, all the same hole, all unaware, all documented. The videos were cut, edited, and titled Acts. Act I, loneliness. Act I, despair. Act I, hope. Act IV, resistance. Act V, collapse. I reported everything. The police opened an investigation. traced his last known location to a basement storage unit in Queens. Inside, they found more notebooks, more USBs, a projector, a script, and the final line, "The show must go on." I moved out within the week. But I still check the floors, always, every room, every rental. And sometimes late at night when I feel eyes on me, I whisper, "I'm not your audience," just in case. Because somewhere out there, Marcus might still be watching and waiting to cast me in his next act. Part 9, When the Basement Smiles. In Detroit, basements have stories. Old buildings lean on cracked foundations, and every home has a downstairs that creaks differently at night. Some store laundry, some collect mildew, some remember things better left forgotten. Mine smiled. I moved into the duplex on Whitmore Street after my roommate left town and my last lease went up by $400. The house was split into 2 units, upstairs and basement level. I took the top. The basement was supposed to be vacant. The landlord was blunt. "Don't go down there, it's locked and that side's being renovated." I didn't ask questions. The rent was cheap, the neighbors were quiet, and I was too tired of couch surfing to care. But from the very first night I heard it, breathing, not mine, not through a vent from beneath the floorboards, soft, rhythmic, like someone trying to remain calm while hiding. I froze, pressed my ear to the ground. It was real. I knocked on the floor once. The breathing paused, then a voice whispered, "Are you still watching me smile?" I recoiled, heart slamming. I convinced myself it was a neighbor's TV or the pipes groaning. I needed sleep. The next morning I asked the landlord again. "The basement's empty. Locked. Don't worry about it." He wasn't worried. That worried me more. That night the lights in my apartment flickered. Then I noticed something worse. In the far corner of the living room, where the wall met the floor, the paint had begun to peel. Beneath the flaking white, something was drawn. A curve. A thick black arch. I scraped more away. 2 points appeared above it. It was a smile, a wide, childlike grin drawn on the inside wall. I backed away slowly. At 3:11 a.m. the breathing returned, and this time it laughed. I installed a white noise machine, slept with headphones, blamed the sounds on my overworked imagination. But the more I ignored it, the louder it got. The breathing turned into giggles, the giggles into humming. Old lullabies warped slightly at the ends. Then came the knocks, always from beneath. Rhythmic, 4 at a time, tap, 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 like it was counting. I tried recording it. Every playback was static except one. On the third night, my phone recorded something else. Not sound, video. A 5-second clip. I don't know how it was recorded, but it showed the vent above my bed. And in that vent, just for a second, 2 fingers curled through the slats. They didn't move, they were just there, waiting. A week later, I came home to find a slip of paper under my pillow. It wasn't there when I left. Scrawled in thick pencil in shaky letters, "Don't stop watching me. If you stop watching, I'll come upstairs." I moved my bed away from the vent. But that night I heard the floorboards crack. Not below, inside. I demanded the key. The landlord wouldn't budge. So I waited until he was away and called a locksmith, paid him cash, said I needed to get my bike. He didn't ask. The door to the basement groaned open like a mouth waking from sleep. It was damp. The stairs were uneven. I descended with my flashlight trembling in my hand. There was no furniture, no tools, just mirrors, dozens of them, some hanging, some shattered, some leaning against the walls. All pointed toward a circle drawn in chalk on the floor. In the center, a chair, and on the walls written in ash, "If you smile back, it won't leave." I stood frozen. The mirrors began to fog, not from breath, from within. Faces appeared, smiles too wide, eyes too flat. They weren't mine. I ran, locked the door, pushed the fridge in front of it. Every mirror in my apartment began to show things I wasn't doing. I'd look away and see myself still staring. One night, I saw myself standing behind me in the reflection, and it waved. So I smashed every mirror, but the windows started reflecting too. One night I woke to find the lights flickering, the fridge pushed aside, the basement door open. Something had crawled out, and on my wall, drawn in black grease, a smile. 10 feet wide. Below it, handprints, all four-fingered. I don't remember calling the police. They found me outside, barefoot, clutching a shard of my mirror. The officer asked, "Why did you block the basement?" I said because it was starting to forget how to smile alone. They didn't understand. No one did. I moved, again. But every apartment since, the same thing happens. The vents giggle, the floor creaks. And in the mirror, just for a moment, I see that grin, not mine, but waiting. Because once you see the smile in the basement, it remembers you. Part 10. No one leaves the end house. I didn't believe in endings until Salem. In the months after I left Detroit, I changed my name. I deleted every social media account, switched banks, and rerouted all mail to a P.O. box in another state. I thought I could sever myself from what happened on Whitmore Street, the grinning thing in the basement, the mirrors that lied, the dreams that weren't mine. I thought if I moved far enough, stayed quiet enough, stopped listening for breathing under floorboards, it would stop remembering me. But I was wrong. Salem wasn't a new beginning. It was where the story had always been going. The end house didn't sit on a map, it lived on a timeline, and all it ever needed was for someone like me to arrive. Worn down, sleep-deprived, barely questioning a house priced too cheap in a neighborhood too quiet. I signed the lease without stepping foot inside. The real estate agent called it a transitional unit. I didn't ask what that meant. I was tired of questions. I just wanted quiet. The street was called Dead Horse Lane. A little on the nose, I know. The last house on the road had no number, just a gate with flaking red paint and a latch that clicked shut behind you, no matter how you tried to hold it open. Locals called it the End House, a nickname I assumed until I saw the deeds. No other name had ever existed. There was no build date, no architect listed, just that title, End House. I laughed at the irony. I stopped laughing when I realized the lights inside turned on at night, even when the electricity was out on the entire block. The first week was silent. No giggles, no smiles etched into the corners of my vision, no strange breathing sounds crawling out of air vents. I thought maybe the curse had stayed behind. Maybe I'd outrun it. Maybe what I'd been hearing in Detroit was a psychotic break, one that ended when I crossed state lines. But dread isn't a ghost that follows you, it's a door. And once you've opened it, it doesn't close, it just waits. The dreams came first. They weren't like the ones I'd had before. These were lucid, suffocating. I'd be walking through the house in pitch black, my fingers brushing against the peeling wallpaper, my feet sinking into floors that felt like flesh. The stairs moved under me like muscle. The walls expanded and contracted as if they were breathing. And always, at the very end, I would reach a room with no ceiling, just an open sky. But the stars weren't stars. They were eyes. Dozens of them, watching, unblinking. When I'd wake, I would find small piles of ash on my pillow, always in the shape of an eye, never there the night before. I told myself I'd leave, but then I met Elsie. She lived 2 doors down. A wiry old woman with clouded eyes and hands that never stopped shaking. She had a patchy garden of dead roses and stones carved with words in languages I didn't recognize. She waved at me on my second day. "You moved into the end house," she said matter-of-factly. "Do you dream in its voice yet?" I stared at her. She smiled, but not like Craig's smile, not like the smile in the basement. Her smile was tired, compassionate. "Don't answer," she said. "Just don't speak to it out loud." And whatever you do, don't accept anything it gives you." I asked her what she meant. She didn't respond. She turned and walked back into her home, leaving her garden gate swinging behind her. I didn't see her again. That night I got my first gift. A box left on the porch, no note, no postage. Inside, a VHS tape, black, unlabeled, wrapped in twine. I didn't own a VHS player. But that didn't stop the tape from playing. At exactly 3 a.m. my TV flickered on by itself. Static. Then the tape. The footage was old, grainy. It showed a family sitting around a table inside my house, the end house. A woman, a man, a young boy with a missing front tooth. They were eating what looked like birthday cake. No one was speaking. No one was moving. The camera didn't shake. It didn't pan. It simply existed in the corner of the room as though the house itself were watching. Then, suddenly, the boy looked directly into the lens. His eyes were empty, and he smiled. Not a child's smile, the one I knew. The one I had seen scratched into my own apartment wall, painted in grease, reflected in mirrors that didn't reflect reality. The screen went black. Then white text appeared, "You are home now." I unplugged the TV, but it stayed on. I smashed it with a hammer. It kept playing until I started crying. And then it stopped. I left the house that morning, slept in my car, drove to Boston, slept in a motel, but something had changed. Every reflection I passed, in windows, in car mirrors, even the black shine of my phone screen, I saw the boy. Sometimes standing behind me, sometimes inside me, always smiling. The end house doesn't let you leave. Not in the way that matters. Your body can cross the street, but your shadow stays. So I went back, not to fight, not to understand, but to finish. Because if I was the last chapter, then I had to read it all the way through. I returned to the house on the final day of October. The street was silent. My neighbors' windows were dark, but the end house was awake. The door opened as I approached, before I could even touch the handle. Inside, the air was thick with dust that didn't fall. It hung in place, suspended like frozen breath. I stepped into the living room. Every wall was covered in photographs. Me, sleeping, me, showering, me, crying in front of a broken mirror. There were others, Craig, the boy, Elsie, people I hadn't seen but who had clearly lived here before. All their faces blurred by time except the mouths. Those were pristine, perfect smiles. At the far end of the hallway, the basement door stood open. A soft hum floated up, not mechanical, musical, like a lullaby sung backward. I walked down the stairs, one by one, each one whispering a different name as I stepped. At the bottom, a room that defied geometry, walls that folded in on themselves, corners that stretched into impossible curves. In the center, a chair. Craig was sitting in it, not dead, not alive, smiling. I stepped closer. His eyes met mine, hollow, brimming with memories not his own. He opened his mouth and spoke in my voice. "You're the last one," I asked. "Last what?" He tilted his head. "The last page, the final frame. After you, the story resets. The house sleeps until another opens the door." I felt it then, all around me, the house breathing, the walls sighing, the ceiling humming in time with my heartbeat. I looked at Craig, at whatever Craig had become, and whispered, "Then how do I end it?" His smile cracked, lips splitting at the edges. "You don't." The lights went out. When I woke, I was back in bed. The box was gone. The photos were gone. The tape was gone. But a new family was moving in next door. I watched them unload their things. A mother, a father, a little girl with curls and purple glasses. They smiled at me. I didn't smile back, because now I knew. The end house doesn't haunt the broken. It waits for those just cracked enough to open a door. And when it does, it becomes them. I can't leave, but I can watch. And maybe, just maybe, I'll smile last, When horror ends, what remains? In a story like mine, where the monsters wear familiar faces, where homes are the battlegrounds and where mirrors lie, there is no neat bow to tie it all together. No scream that marks a final death. No satisfying last stand. There's only survival, and sometimes survival is the scariest part. Looking back now from the relative safety of hindsight, I can admit something I never could before. I stayed because part of me wanted to. I walked into the house not just because I was curious, but because I was already broken, tired, disconnected from the world and the people around me. And that's the part the house understood. That's how it chose me. Not with brute force, not with haunted chains or sudden deaths, but with an invitation. Come see. The smile wasn't just a face on a wall or a whisper in the dark. It was a contract, a handshake in the void, and I said yes. Maybe not with words, but I said it all the same, every time I ignored my instincts, every time I chose denial over fear, every time I turned the key, stepped into the basement, or stared into a mirror a second too long. I said yes to the smile, to what it represented, and what it wanted. For years, I tried to convince myself I was a victim of circumstance, that the horror was external, that Craig was just an unlucky neighbor, that the end house was just another haunted property in a town with too much history. But it's only now that I see the deeper truth. The smile doesn't infect houses, it infects people. It waits until we're numb enough to stop asking questions, until we crave silence more than safety, until the idea of being consumed feels easier than the effort of healing. And then it appears, a mouth drawn beneath peeling paint, a giggle in the vent, a reflection that lingers too long. From there it spreads, not through touch, but through attention. Once you see it sees you back. I still remember the first time I heard breathing beneath my floorboards. I remember pressing my ear to the wood, convinced it was a trick of the pipes, a creak in the heating system. But deep down I knew something was there, and not just in a physical sense. Something had noticed me, seen my cracks, my grief, my exhaustion, my emptiness, and it smiled, not with cruelty, with hunger. Over the course of this journey, I've been haunted by many things: whispers in the dark, VHS tapes that play impossible footage, neighbors with eyes too still. But the scariest thing I encountered was myself, the version of me that appeared in mirrors before I looked, the me that smiled when I should have screamed, the me that kept going back. Because at its core, this story isn't about a haunted house, or a cursed street, or even Craig and the other residents who were taken before me. This is a story about recognition, about what happens when a soul sees its reflection in the dark and smiles. If this story spoke to you, if it scared you, moved you, made you feel seen in ways you didn't expect, I ask only one thing: support the stories that see you. Subscribe to this channel, not just to catch the next tale, but to keep this space alive. A space for truth wrapped in shadows, for honesty in the form of horror, for healing disguised as fear. There are more stories coming, and they may be darker, stranger, deeper, but they'll always lead you back to yourself. So, if you're ready to keep walking through the dark with us, subscribe, turn on notifications, and let us know in the comments, what have you seen that still smiles back? We'll be watching. But not the way the house did, with care, with courage, with you.